So by now we can see that the class disparity that was present in mainland Britain had now found its way to the British colonies as well. More than half the colonists who came to the North American shores in the colonial period came as servants. They were mostly English in the 17th century, Irish and German in the 18th century. More and more slaves replaced them as they ran away to freedom or finished their time. But as late as 1755, white servants made up 10% of the population of Maryland. The colonial society was not democratic and certainly not equalitarian. It was dominated by men who had money enough to make others work for them. And few of these men were descended from indentured servants, and practically none of them had been of that class. So, you know how it's saying like the indentured servants eventually would be free and then they could do things. Essentially what it's teaching us here is that once the time was up, once they had done whatever they needed to do, it's not like they miraculously began to thrive in that society. They were still poor. They were still basically gonna work for the rich people, and they really were all screwed. Like, you were either rich or you were poor. Whew. It seems quite clear that class lines hardened through the colonial period. The distinction between rich and poor became sharper. By 1700, there were 50 rich families in Virginia with wealth equivalent to 50,000 pounds who lived off the labor of black slaves and white servants, owned plantations, sat on the governor's council, served as local magistrates. In Maryland, the settlers were ruled by a proprietor whose right of total control over the colony had been granted by the English king. Between 1650 and 1689, there were 5 revolts against the proprietor. Essentially, the only people that were able to vote were landowners. The only people that were rich were the landowners, and there were only 50 of them in Virginia. So if you weren't part of those families, you were working for those people, and that's it. That was your destiny in the colonies.